Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the UltraRunning Magazine podcast. Dr. Jason Wagner, who is not here to talk to us about ticks, poison oak, the heat, whatever apocalyptic disaster we have for you ultrarunners. We're here
Today
to talk.
It's STIs. We're talking about trail STIs.
No, we're not. Oh my gosh. If that ever becomes a thing, I'm out. I'm done. But we're here to talk about your race report about Cascade Crest 100, otherwise known as the Cascade Crest Classic. Can we Dr. Wagner, or can we go with Jason today?
Jason works great. Jason always works.
Great. It's good to see you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thanks. Good to see you too.
So how long has it been since you crossed that finish line?
I think we're hitting week 3. I think this weekend will be week 3.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So let's get into it. So can you give the folks kind of a rundown about Cascade Crest and just a profile about that?
Sure. And first I'm going to just do my St. Louis beer invite here. Incarnation, it's reincarnation we're going with since I'm trying to recover from my race. So we'll go with the Incarnation Ale here.
I love it. Good job, my friend.
So cheers.
Oh, cheers. I got my water, my cold, non-alcoholic ice water over here. So
yeah. California's got its benefits, but it's after 1 over in my time. So here we are.
Excellent.
Yeah. So a couple of things, I guess, just on the course itself. So it takes place out of Easton, a small town in the Cascades, about an hour and some change east out of Seattle. So it's actually really nicely located near Seattle. So it's not too hard to get to as far as mountain runs go. And I thought that was really nice. And for me now, I've now my 3rd year in a row. I think this will be the highest elevation change I've seen in a race. So this was 23,000 feet up and 23,000 feet down. And because of a last minute course change, it actually was more. And I haven't actually looked at my GPS to say what it said I did, but the course is supposed to be a point to point where you do kind of a circular route through the Cascades and end up back at Easton again. But due to some trail work this year on part of the Cascade Trail, they ended up doing an out and back. So it ended up, I gained 2 miles of trail time, which was great. So it's 102 miles and some amount of extra elevation as well. Some after 23K, some small amount of extra elevation. And it's a new race start time for me too. So it was a Friday morning race start, which I've not done before. And it was kind of nice, especially trying to get back home again after the race. Being able to have like an extra weekend day to coordinate getting yourself back home again was great. And it was morning start, which was nice too. My last race was an evening start, and those European style starts a little rough.
So what was the sort of the makeup of the course in terms of the terrain you're dealing with?
Nearly all single track, which was really awesome. So it's like 3/4 single track and a little half or a quarter of fire roads, and then just only the very beginning and end were paved. So it's like 4% paved. So you run out on a paved road to get to the first fire road, and then you're almost immediately thrust into trails. And then it's because of sound back, then same thing back. So you spend almost all your time on single track, which was really awesome. And the views are just incredible. Of the Cascades and Mount Rainier. And if you haven't seen Rainier in all its glory on a beautiful summer day, it's really impressive. And I actually used to live in Seattle. I lived in Tacoma when I was in the Army, and I moved there in the winter. And for anybody who's from the Northwest, you will know that generally means no sun, drizzle, and clouds. And I lived there for 2 months, and I kept seeing these photos of Mount Rainier. And I one day walked out of my apartment 2 months after living there, and there's this giant volcanic mountain right outside of my apartment window. And I was like, oh my God, that's what they're talking about. And it's incredible, but you will go 2 months straight without seeing it because there's just this dome of gray over the whole area.
That's crazy. That is,
but
so
no
crazy.
Gray on the race. It was perfect. It was a little warm, but great weather, and no real rain, and beautiful views the whole way.
Yeah, that's something that is you just kind of don't know what to expect sometimes in the Pacific Northwest. It seems like they're just getting pummeled with heat this year, this summer. Yeah. So you just never know if you're going to be just getting lots of rain or a beautiful day, which you had, or the heat. So it sounds like you lucked out.
Yeah, I packed for all weather events. So if you look, they will get some of these big tropical storms that come through, and they are a rainforest, so they'll get just a ton of rain. Usually not in the summer, but occasionally it'll happen. And I was prepared for a deluge of rain and 30-something degree temps, all the way to 90-degree temps, and we ended up warmer than usual. But I think highs on the race day were mid 80s. So it was a little warm when you got up to the tops of the mountains, but overall, from what it could have been, it was pretty good weather.
Why did you choose this race?
Oh, I'm trying to get a couple of the historic races under my belt before I'm too old to do this shit. And so this is both a Western States and a Hard Rock qualifier. And I'm on cycle where I had to tick my box for both of those for the year. So now I've got that check mark. Spoiler alert, I finished the race. So I've got those boxes checked for another year and another 2 years.
How many tickets?
And also, I love mountains. I love going out to the mountains, even though I don't live in a mountain area. Yeah. And then, I know the area. I have family who lives here, so it was kind of an excuse to see family as well.
Yeah, yeah. How many tickets do you have in for states?
Not enough to care how many I have yet. So, I'm not at the point where I'm like, all right, I should get in this year.
Yeah.
So I'm probably in the like 16% odds or something like that.
Okay.
So I think I probably have 6 or something of that nature. Okay. 5 or 6.
When I was interviewing a lot of folks who finished states at the finish line this year, and like one question I kept asking was, how many tickets did you have? And like 7 to 8 tickets seemed to be like the magic number for a lot of these folk. Like it was the most common number I kept getting over and over and over again. It was either that or my first time.
Yeah, or one.
My one. Like, you lucky dog. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if I told you this. I can't remember if I shared this before or not. But this year I actually forgot to enter. So
you did not.
Yeah, which may be another reason why I'm at Cascade Crest.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I was. So at that time of year, we're doing resident interviews. So we're really busy interviewing a whole bunch of people twice a week. It's really busy. And one day I was like, oh, I got to get my Hard Rock and my Western States registrations in. Yeah. And I go to log in and it's like the lottery's in 2 weeks. So I was like, oh, or whatever it was. It's like, your entry has passed. Come see who got in when you didn't.
So there's a good chance that, you could get into both. I talked to one guy who got into both Hard Rock and States, which is a double whammy because they're like, 2-3 weeks apart from each other?
Not much. Yeah, I will be I think you can defer one of them. And so I will definitely be deferring if I get into both, because I really don't want to get in and not finish.
No, definitely not. Gosh dang it. And, and there's something to be said about giving up your spot to someone else who isn't in that kind of predicament of doing 2 really hardcore, especially Hard Rock, holy moly, back-to-backs like that. But unless, you're Courtney Walter, Pam Reed, who those guys are just like magic. Oh my God.
I don't have a lot of vert around here, so I have to work really hard to get it. And I can't do continuous, and I can't imagine doing Western States, which would be, that's a reasonable race for me to train for.
Yeah.
Even the heat part of it.
Yeah.
But then to go right from that to this huge mountain run, my legs would never be, I do not think my legs could make it in the time frames allotted.
So let's talk about for a second. So just as reminder to folks that you are from the great city of St. Louis. And so what's the elevation there, St. Louis?
I think I'm at 640 feet right now.
Okay. So
I can give you an exact number here. We'll dial it up on the old watch. We are at 565 feet. I'm on the 7th floor of a building.
I was going to say 565 feet. So good
640 might be like the tops I get to when I'm out running. That might be the tops of the hills.
So how did you train for the elevation in this guy?
Yeah. So it's, I work with a coach, Sean Bearden. He's out of Idaho, so he's got mountains in his backyard. And we really talk. His first question always, why do you keep doing these mountain runs? And I'm like, I love running in the mountains, and it's where if I could have the job I have in the mountains, that's what I would do ideally. So, so to get the vert, basically, I just find the biggest elevation components I can find, and I just do repeats. So I get a lot of elevation, but I just don't get it in a continuous fashion all the way up for, I'm looking at the profiles here. Like this race opens up, and you go from, and I have my map in front of me. You go from 2,500 feet to 5,000 feet in 2.5, 3 miles.
Oh man.
So, you're gaining 2,500 feet of vert in 3 miles. And the best thing I can do is I can gain 600 in 1 mile. And there's like one hill near where I live where I can get that elevation. So I just go out for a day and I just go up and down that hill, up and down, up and down. And
that's its own brand of crazy to get out there and do that. Oh my gosh.
And it's all loose rocks. So it's not like it's this great groomed trail. So it makes descending really interesting. And I think actually it helps my descending. I do pretty well descending. It's the climbing I kind of suck at.
Yeah. Yeah. You might make a good, like a timed event run, like a 32-hour run where you go hit a track to see how far you could go just with that lunacy of just like the repetitiveness, over and over and over again.
I am not that crazy. That is its own special breed of crazy.
It is. God bless their hearts, man. I'm tempted to try that sometime just to see what I could do and just to be part of that vibe. Would be kind of interesting. Because it's its own breed of folks. So yeah, I think one of these days, I think I gotta do it. And plus, as you get older, as you get older, it's just more attainable, I think, to get out there and do that.
Well, if your goal is to just be out there and accomplish what you can in the time frame and take breaks, take rests, it's you're in the same spot 5 minutes later. So
yeah, exactly.
You don't have to worry about getting rescued.
No, which is probably me. I mean, I should wear a helmet when I run because I am so accident prone. So
along the lines of training, the other component of training that I did this year that I hadn't done before is as we looked at my times, Sean just was like, you're not going to get the vert in, you should get in. So he tried to add some extra components. And the new one we did was high intensity cycling intervals into my running. And so you get on your bike, put it in a really high chain ring, really big chain ring up front, and you crank for 3 minutes as hard as you can go at a high chain ring. And it's that resistance. There's theory that it initiates the same muscular endurance changes you get from hiking uphill or running uphill if you're capable. And so we integrated that into my training like once a week as well. I can't tell you that did or didn't help. I guess I can say that I felt about the same as I did last year in Virginia with a similar at the Grindstone 100 with a similar elevation change, a little less, but kind of a similar rolling mountainous elevation change.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting, a new way to train.
How did your training compare to past hundreds that you did in terms of preparedness?
I think I was probably more prepared for this than any race I've done so far. Last year for Grindstone, I partially ruptured my Achilles tendon decades ago. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while it flares up, and right before I was getting the high mileage in Grindstone, it flared up. So I had to really cut back my training until just the bitter end where I was like, if I don't get the miles in now, I can't run. And so I gambled and I was just like, I'm going to push myself as hard as I can. And my tendon will either say you have to stop running completely, or I'll get past it and I'll get my mileage and my vert in. And that's through a late push. I got enough miles and vert in for Grindstone. This year I remained injury free the whole time. And I guess that I broke a toe. I broke my great toe on a rock, but it healed up pretty quickly. So it didn't stop my running at all.
Getting back to your rupturing your Achilles tendon. Ouch. What was that experience like?
So that was high school. I was a high level high school wrestler and college wrestler for a while, wrestled on the Olympic level for a short period of time. And so I was a sophomore in high school, and I partially ruptured it, took a shot on a guy and just heard it pop and couldn't walk, was able to limp my way through the match. And then I just never rehab properly. And in wrestling, you can change your style to accommodate your injuries. And so that's what I did. I just learned how to use a different leg, shoot a little differently. And I managed with a pretty weak Achilles tendon to get all the way through a decade plus more of wrestling after that at a really high level. And then I don't know when I discovered this, but I kind of looked at my calves one day and I was like, my left calf is like 1.5 times the size of my right calf. And it's because I just never rehabbed my right leg. And then when I got into running, I probably do, 4/5 or 3/5 of my work on my left leg, and my right leg is just kind of along for the ride. It just pushes me over so I can use my left leg again. Cause I never developed that strength back.
Wow.
And I need to. It's all my fault. And so I'm working on that continuously, but I'm way behind.
Wow. All these years later, it's just still a bit of an ankle biter, excuse the expression.
Yeah. And again, Mike, Sean's opinion on it is, as I talked to him about rehab and stuff, he's like, well, if it functions and you're able to perform, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, work on it, but don't let it worry you, as long as you're able to still do the things you do.
Yeah.
And I'm now a decade into ultra running, and I've had 2 incidences where it's really flared up, and it did make me drop out of a 100-mile race several years ago, but I haven't had anything that bad since then.
Wow. I knew that you wrestled in high school. I think we shared that. We had that common experience in our last conversation, but I didn't know the degree to which you were competing. Can I ask you a little bit about that?
Sure.
That you said that you were competing at like an Olympic level. Is that right?
At the open level in USA Wrestling. So the best I got there was, I was in the Army actually, and the Army has a pretty good Greco-Roman wrestling team. And I got as high as number 4 on the Olympic ladder in Greco, and I beat the number 3 guy in the freestyle ladder from the prior Olympics. So I got like close enough to see what success might look like, but I was far enough away that I was like, I can see it from here, but I'm probably never going to taste it.
Yeah. Wow. Did you compete on an international level then, or just nationally?
So I did local international tournaments, but I never traveled overseas beyond like some touring things with local clubs. Never. Yeah. So I've done some international tournaments, but all based in the US.
Do you have any like memorable experiences from those days that you kind of go back to and think, man, that was pretty rad?
I can't remember. Well, I can't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but when we talked about cutting weight, and I opted not to cut weight when I first started on the Army team. And it was my first international tournament, and I'd never wrestled anyone at that level before. You think, college is one thing, but international, it's 10 years of college graduates who are now at their highest level, plus everybody else from the world.
Yeah.
And I wrestled my first legitimate 180.5 pounder, which means the person probably weighs 200 and some change when they're not cutting weight. And they just destroyed me. Like, I couldn't move them. I would shoot it on their leg, and they wouldn't even respond to the fact that I was attacking their leg. They would just throw me to the side. And after that experience, I was like, Coach, you're right. I'm not a 180.5 pounder.
Yeah.
And he was like, you are for the rest of the season.
Oh, no.
That's where I won my spot on the team.
No.
And so he made me finish out the regular season. And then for national championships, I got to cut down to 163. And I ended up going to the placing 8th. I think I placed 8th that year on the national tournament.
Yeah.
And I was ahead by 12 points at one point in the match, just under what was a technical fall. I think was 15 at the time. And then I decided to try this new move, and it didn't work. And I tried it again, and it didn't work. And I tried again, it didn't work. And the next thing I knew, I was lost the match, even though I was ahead by 12 points. No. And that was the difference between 7th and 8th. It was me trying silly moves that I didn't know how to complete yet.
Yeah. I wrestled up 2 weight classes from where I was at. I was a freshman. I was scrawny, like 108 pounds, and I was wrestling like 119s. And I had no business, but we had they needed someone to fill that. I was the only person who could. And I just
Your goal was don't get pinned.
Are you kidding? My goal was to last as long as I could, because I was going to get pinned. It was just it was an eventuality. I was terrible that first year. I just remember why am I even doing this? I cannot win a match. And And so my dad went out and he got me a weight set to have at home to try and bulk out a little bit. But I was like, I was so scrawny. Like I could not.
And I think what people don't appreciate is that when you're weighing 108, wrestling 119, you're wrestling people who weigh 125, 130. And so you're not just outweighed by those 11 pounds. It's like 21 pounds.
Yeah, of muscle, no less, in some cases. And their experience, too, because you're coming as this like this greenhorn that has no idea. And
I think I'll credit wrestling with all the grit I have in every successful endeavor I've gone through, because there aren't many things less thankful to, or less forgiving, more forgiving. Boy, I can't talk today. It's that quarter of a beer I've had. There are not many things that are more unforgiving than wrestling. You're out there by yourself, and if you're new, you have no idea what you're doing, and there's nobody who can cover for you. And all you're going to do is learn through the torture of the person you're wrestling against.
Yeah. So I was in high school back in the late 80s. When I was wrestling.
Yeah, I'm 88, class of 88.
Okay. And I remember we had a crosstown rival that we were wrestling against in our gym. And we heard rumors that there was a girl who was wrestling on their team, which is more common these days. In fact, I think they may even have like all girl wrestling teams now, which is super badass and cool. But that was unheard of back in those days. And so and the rumor was that she was wrestling in my weight class. And so all the upperclassmen just like, they ribbed me so hard that, dude, you're gonna have to wrestle a chick. Like, I'm sorry to say chick. I apologize for that. You're gonna have to wrestle a girl. And I was mortified that I could lose this because I know how badly I suck at this thing. And so like, like when teams, they come running out of the locker rooms, they run around the mat. She comes running out of the locker room, and there she is, just running with the team. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen. And she was their third stringer, and luckily I didn't have to wrestle her because one, you don't want to like lose to a girl on in front of all your friends, but then there's also you don't want to
the fragile ego of the young male.
Oh my gosh, but then you don't want to beat a girl either because you come off like an asshole. It's like especially for like someone who's 14 years old to have to deal with like this. So like, how do I even handle this this delicate thing?
I'll give you my coach's immortal advice. So same thing happened in North Dakota where I grew up. It was my sophomore year, maybe, when the rule is basically if there's not a girls' alternative to the boys' sport, then the girl can compete in the boys' sport. So no girls wrestling yet. So we have our first girl competing against us that we've experienced. And my friend's about to go on the mat. And my coach goes, all right, Eric, it's like, you have nothing to win and everything to lose. Now go get her. And I thought, he framed it perfectly for the way we were all thinking at the time. And now I think when I look back, like when I run and I look at the field and I'm like, I am going to get beat by 30% of the women in this field today. That's just the way it is, and my ego has grown and it's not as fragile as it used to be back then.
Yeah. And the other element of that too is that, and I was like, all these memories are coming back. It's like, it is having to put your hands on another dude. I was a virgin throughout high school. Okay. My story was going to be, I'll be the 40-year-old virgin. That's going to be me. I was undateable. And so like, I had like, in terms of like coming into the space of a woman, of a young teenager, like I just was so uncomfortable with the idea of trying to put my hands, like you put your hands everywhere on a person in wrestling. You've got like your elbows and forearms and arms and crevices and places that you probably would be arrested for if you weren't arrested.
There's a move called the butt drag. So,
Oh my gosh. Or like the banana split. Oh my gosh. The banana split. That was the most humiliating wrestling move it's like, if you don't know what the banana split is, it's where you basically, if you got your leg intertwined with someone else's and you outstretch it as far as you can and basically split their legs wide open.
I challenge you to get your legs up high enough to show us, Scotty.
No, no, I don't want to go see my chiropractor or my GP later today, which I would have to do.
Actually, my now that we're on the wrestling tangent, but a good friend of mine, Terry Steiner, he's been the women's Olympic coach for the past 15 years maybe now. So he's really been there from the beginning of women really getting into wrestling. And I think probably in the last Olympics, the women's team proportionately took away more medals than the men's team, I think.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Yeah. I ended up seeing that girl at an open tournament like a few weeks later. And like, I think she was kicking guys' asses. Like it was really cool to see. But you know, again, still my weight class. I'm like, are we going to meet up later?
Yeah, it's common sense doesn't reign when you're 14. It's
no.
You're just it's all about public humiliation and your fear of it.
Pretty much. And okay, just one more thought. I swear, one more thought. Like, and I'm sorry if I'm going to get a little like not PG-13, maybe a little R-rated here, but like you're wrestling in a singlet, like. It leaves nothing to the imagination. So here I am wrestling a girl. What if I like something gets stirred down there, and then it's
and at 14 you have no control.
You have no control over it. And for a guy who is like, again, I've never really touched a girl before. Like I've just gotten that close. Like all bets are completely off. Oh my gosh, my mind was a circus.
This could be a whole sitcom episode right here. Just what goes on in your head before this match.
Boy.
I think of like Freaks and Geeks or I can't remember what the Golden Years, is that what it was?
The Wonder Years.
The Wonder Years.
She was probably thinking, thank God I don't have to wrestle that strange ranger over there. She was probably more petrified than I was. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're talking about running an ultra, right? Is that the?
That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. Okay. What was your expectation going into Cascade Crest?
I think my expectation is always to be faster than I end up being. And then I get set right about halfway through the course. And that was probably my expectation again. I think part of it's because I never really get to train on the terrain I'm going to compete in. And so I always have this envisioning that my training has made me dramatically better this year than last year. Yeah. And it's going to be demonstrated for the world today when I hit the course. And then I end up having to reset those expectations. And so if you would ask me, like, what's your goal today? I probably would have said, if I could be sub 26 hours, that would be my primary goal. And if I can be sub 30, that's my tertiary or secondary goal. And then my fallback goal is to finish the race. Yeah. And I came just shy of my secondary goal.
Oh, well, congratulations. That's fantastic news.
Yeah, I was 30 hours in like 4 minutes or something like that.
So what was your game plan going into that? And then how did that compare to what actually happened out there?
Great question. My game plan was two things. One was to stay within my my pacing and what I could honestly do and sustain, and not do. And I go back to my last Leadville, which was 2 years ago, where I set a pace goal. And then when I wasn't on pace, I really stretched myself to try to get that pace back. And I ended up just really blowing up, coming back over hope for the second time. And so my goal this year was to not do that, to not try to maintain a pace, but rather to maintain a feel. And then my second goal with that was to keep in consistent calories the entire race, and to not just eat when I was hungry, but to have a prescribed calorie intake and to maintain it throughout the race. And so my second goal, I actually did a pretty good job with. My first goal, what I didn't think about when I set that goal was the fact that the whole front of the race is basically a giant climb. Mm-hmm. And again, you go from like 2,500-ish feet and you finally top out at around 6,000-ish feet, somewhere in that ballpark before all the initial climbing's done. And I didn't account for the fact that I could walk in a not too fast fashion, hiking uphill, but it would still be walking faster, hiking faster than I should be for a 100-mile race. Mm-hmm. And so that I went out too fast on that first climb, and then I really felt it for the rest of the race. And you're going 22 minutes a mile. So you're like, I'm not going too fast. I don't feel like I'm going too fast. Yet you are, because this is the first 7 miles of a 100-mile race.
Do you pay attention to your heart rate at all?
I do when I train, but I don't really when I race. And part of it is, I wear a Garmin, and the wrist heart rate is just so inaccurate that I don't put a lot of stock into what it's telling me. But I train, I use a heart rate monitor on my chest. But when I race longer distances, that thing just chews your chest up. I can't find the spot on my chest where it doesn't just give me chest strap burn. So I abandon it over time and don't wear it. So heart rate I care less about. I really go by feel and how am I feeling. And now I think I have to put in a little common sense into that for races like this, where it's like, well, you feel okay, but and I should say okay means really great. Like, you have to feel great at the beginning of these races, because if you're feeling okay at mile 7, that means you're going to feel really terrible at mile 93.
Yeah. So did you have any sort of just problems develop physically during the race, and then beyond that, mentally during the race?
Yeah. So I think from the physical aspect, the biggest thing for me was nausea. And I had my stomach turn usually when I overexert myself in my races, but it typically starts more like halfway through the race or so. But this time I was nauseous from like mile 10 on.
Oh boy.
And I didn't throw up at all, but I was basically force feeding myself gels from mile 10 on with absolutely zero pleasure in taking calories.
What was that gel at mile 90 like for you?
It just became like prescribed medicine. My dog just had an ACL repair, and so we're giving her sedatives and pain medications so that she can not tear ruin her new repair. And I feel like the way my dog looks when I'm force feeding her pills right now, where it's just like, I'm sorry, Orchid, this has to happen. And you're just like, I'm sorry, Jason, this gel just has to happen.
Right. So did you deviate from your nutrition plan at all? Because just like you couldn't do it, or because you had to like go with something that just had to work better for you given the circumstance?
The only deviation I really made was that I occasionally took food at a crew station or an aid station, where I would do like some ramen or something like that. And then I would just kind of subtract those calories from my expected intake and kind of forgive myself that next gel because I drank a cup of ramen. But the truth is that nothing really appealed to me for the whole race. And so I really stuck to the gels because I was keeping them down, and I didn't want to mess with a good thing. Well, I didn't want to mess with a good, bad thing. I don't know exactly how you want to phrase that, but it was like I was on the precipice of gastric failure, and I didn't want to mess with it. So
yeah, oof, that's rough to be in that spot, because you have to sustain yourself. You have to, and you've just got this huge ass, just Hobbit, Lord of the Rings-esque journey ahead of you, and you're doing your best to like not go to Mordor like internally.
Yeah, and I'd say your next question was, did I have any struggles? I think was there something along those lines. But
mentally, yeah,
that was actually I got to that like 20-ish mile point, and I'm just looking at what's left in front of me, and not only that, but on this course, it's like I know now that I just have to turn around and repeat everything I did. And so it was a real struggle until I got to the halfway point of just, I've got more to do than I've done. And I feel my stomach feels this bad already, and I'm off pace a little bit. And, I've got, and I think too, it's always, I like running at night, but it's that thought of like, I still have to go through a night, and then it's a day still, because I know I'm not going to finish before sunrise.
Yeah. And
when you finish under 24 in a race that starts in the morning, there's really some incentive to be like, I'm going to finish at night, and it's going to be dark when I'm done, and I'm not going to have to see the sun again. And just knowing that's coming around again for you is like, oh man, it was never like I'm going to have to quit, or I think I'm going to quit, or it was just like, this is terrible. Why the fuck am I out here?
Yeah.
And I've got so much more to go before I'm done. And I think part of it was because I was just like, I'm not going to quit, so I'm just going to have to get through it. So how bad will it be to just get through it? And I have a motto in medicine that somebody told me a long time ago, and it was, if you can't get out of it, get into it. And so, yeah, and that's kind of the way I look at a race like this. It's like, well, I can get out of it, but I'm choosing not to. So just get as into it as I can get.
Yeah, yeah. What kind? That's a really great saying, by the way. I need to write that one down.
And I'm going to add to that the other, like, I think really, I don't know if it was demoralizing, but it was my, like, are you fucking kidding me moment of the race was, because it's an out and back now. As I'm going out, the race leader passes me coming back, and I'm at mile 40, and I'm like, this guy's 20 fucking miles ahead of me right now. It's just like, you've got to be kidding me. And that's just like, it's so humbling to see that front pack just come blistering back, and you're like, how can humans move that fast?
Yeah. I had that experience my only 100 attempt, and they were just flying by me at mile 45, and I was DFL. I was like the last person as far as I knew out there, and which turned into a DNF. But first you get like this is like incredible like respect for them, and like, oh my gosh, this is what a triumph this is. So cool to see them doing this and accomplishing something so amazing that but then you're like, I just go inward, just like berating myself, like, why didn't you work harder? You're in this sucky predicament. You're your own worst enemy. Yeah, that's tough. That is really cool, but also really can be demoralizing.
And on these out and backs, it's kind of fun to see some of the elites that you read about and you watch YouTube videos of and stuff, and you're like, oh, there's so and so, and Amelia Boone was the leading woman at the time when
she's awesome.
Went past. It's like, Amelia, like, you're one of my heroes, and you're kicking my ass right now. So it was just incredible how much faster they were. And actually, I ended the whole thing when it was done. I emailed my coach about the results, and I'm like, I've got to get faster. How do I get faster? It's like, and I don't expect to be competing with these 20 and 30 somethings, but it's like, I just want to be kind of a little bit further up the pack when they start to pass me.
Yeah.
And he sent back some things, and it's like pregnancy or like delivering a baby. You forget things after a little bit of time. And at the 3 days out, 5 days out, I'm like, I have to do a lot of painful work to get faster. I think I'm okay where I am. I'm just going to hone things a little bit. I'm okay.
That's funny. I interviewed someone who ran the race with you, Fawn, who Pigtails. She just completed her 100th plus mile. Hold on, get this right. She just finished her 100th 100 plus mile endurance event just this Monday. And she just pumps out ultras like they're Pez dispensers, right? It's just ludicrous. What an amazing person and athlete she is. But she loves Cascade because of the sort of down home OG old school vibes that it has. Does that ring true for you? And is that something that you kind of look for in a race too?
I guess for me, what I love is the spectacle of some of these bigger events.
Mm-hmm.
I think Leadville's an example of that. And you've seen Western States numerous times. Like, it's that, this isn't just another race, but I think actually Cascade Crest kind of, it's this combination of a hometown backyard race
mm-hmm.
with the spectacle and support of one of the bigger races. And it's that combination that was really unique. The number of runners there who knew each other and were friends, and they knew all the local runners who were all in the race, and seeing that community at such a big race was really cool. And unexpected. I didn't expect that was going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, really interesting to see, and a new thing for me at a race like this.
There are a few things about this race that make it quite special. Not in, putting the community aside in terms of just what you experience out there, including the, was it Snoqualmie Pass Tunnel. Am I saying that right?
Yep,
Is that something
yep.
you experienced? What are some things, highlights, just kind of environmentally speaking, that you experienced here that stood out?
Well, the rats were interesting.
Say what now?
Yeah, there's rats. Maybe they were mice. I don't know. There's rodents in the tunnel that scurry away when you put your headlamp on them. And
Why is the floor moving?
You're stuck in this tunnel. You can't see the entrance and
It
you can't see the
squeaks
exit.
every time I step. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm done.
There's mice and rats all around you when you look around. And so that was an interesting experience. And it's one of the few flat parts on the course. And people who run a fair amount of flat stuff, they recognize that running the same grade continuously gets old after a while when you're used to trail and up and down. And so to go, I think it's 2.5 miles, it's 2 miles and some change one way. And then because of the course change, we just had to turn around and go right back in the tunnel again and do 2.5 miles the other way.
Yeah.
So that was, I won't say it was my favorite part of the course, but it was an interesting, unique component. And they have a nice skeleton placed about halfway through that says Pacer on its chest, and it's like put in the quarter.
Oh, thanks. So thanks for the panic attack, folks. That's great.
Yeah, they make some fun out of it. I thought the ropes course before it was, whatever you want to call it, the ropes section was interesting, where it's such a steep incline that they have to put up ropes for you. And to go down it is one thing, but then we had to go back up it again. And when I went down, my crew didn't have my glove. They forgot to give me my gloves, and my brain doesn't work anymore when I'm racing. So you're descending this rope without gloves, which I had to be very cautious. Yeah. Fortunately, I had them for the way up, but then people are coming down as you're going up. There's 2 ropes, but loose boulders are getting kicked free and things like that. So you're dodging the occasional boulder, and that was an interesting part that I've not done on a course before.
Huh. I'm kind of scatterbrained my questions with you, which is like my favorite kind of interview. But how do you preoccupy your brain when you are kind of pushing past mile 50, mile 60 into this sort of abyss where it starts becoming the mental game?
Winston Churchill.
No shit.
If anyone cares, there's a 3-part biography on Winston Churchill that is 3 audiobooks that are 50 hours each. And so it's 150 hours of Winston Churchill. And it takes me about 25 hours to finish an ultra. I usually don't listen to anything for the first marathon or so. So I get about 20-ish hours of Winston Churchill every ultra I do. And I'm currently into the 3rd book finally. And we're at the close of World War II and getting ready to kind of see the end of the war and then the peace that follows. So I've been listening to that now for like 6 years on every ultra I do.
No kidding. In your darkest hour, you go to your own darkest hour, you go to Winston Churchill. That's amazing. I never considered doing an audiobook before during a long training run or whatever. That's genius. I mean, I guess listen to podcasts, it's not the same thing. But
I've done a few other things too. That's my standard. Like that's the one I spend the most time on. I like listening sometimes to scary short stories at night during the night section. Wow. It's just kind of interesting.
Okay.
Your brain can go a few places that it doesn't normally go when you can't see anything but the front of your headlamp. And then podcasts I do, the one that I'm really turned on to right now, and it's not super new, but 60 songs that explain the 90s. And it's a really good podcast that gets into the kind of history and background of popular songs from the 90s. And so I know most of the songs, and the ones I don't know, it teaches me something about a genre that I might not have been into back then. Yeah. And it's just kind of fun because it integrates all the music into the podcast. And so that's a really good time killer.
That's a great podcast concept. I love it. I got to check it out. The 90s, they brought us so many wonderful genres and music. It also gave us a lot of shit too.
And they talk about some of the shit as well as the good stuff.
A lot of bad stuff. What's your favorite type of music from that era?
I mean, I probably have to go to grunge.
Yeah,
I lived in Tacoma when grunge blew up.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was a poor Army private with 2 kids and a wife and no money. So I didn't get to see much of it, but I got to hear it and kind of be in the vibe of it when it was starting to explode. So I would say that from the 90s, that's kind of my go-to. And then probably leaving with like adult alternative, Radiohead, that kind of stuff as I was exiting the 90s.
Which bands were you heavily into back in those days?
Oh, I would say probably Pearl Jam being the number one.
Yeah.
Although I will, again, I have to say I was a poor person with lots of bills and not much money back in the era where you had to actually buy your music to listen to what you wanted to.
Yeah.
And so I would probably, as a family, we would purchase one CD every other month or so.
Oh my God, that's so sweet.
So that would be like, you choose wisely when that's the case.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of some of the stuff we listened to back then. Sheryl Crow, she was someone we got into. It's because they were generally like family purchases. It was my wife and I would have to compromise on somebody we could both listen to. Jewel was another one that we liked a lot back then. She's also a Pacific Northwesterner. Those are the ones that come to mind. John Mellencamp's always been my go-to guy. But as far as the 90s specifically, those are some of the bands.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I was really into the whole grunge movement with Soundgarden and Nirvana and Mudhoney and Sub Pop was huge back for you guys then, just as a distributor of amazing music too. Wow.
Yeah, I went out and visited Sub Pop a few years back, but probably more than a few years now. But they shut down and got bought out, I think.
Yeah.
So and
go ahead. Sorry.
I would say Dave Grohl bought them out, if I remember right. But
so listen up, kids. So back when Jason and I were in college, in high school, we used to subscribe to something called the BMG Music Club. Did you ever do that?
I'm not going to lie that when I said we'd go a CD every other month, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Is I did go that shortcut for a while.
Right.
You're like, how do I cancel this thing?
Yeah, they would, you'd pay $20 or something, and you'd get.
But initially it was you sent them a penny.
You sent them a penny. That's right.
And they sent you 12 CDs or something like that.
And then it was a monthly subscription, and you paid like a ridiculous amount of money per month for a CD. That BMG guy is still looking for me. Like, I don't think I was so to ask for, but and there was a lot of terrible music selections. Like, you got just enough good CDs and then like a couple of wah-wahs, and they're like, maybe they had one fairly good song at best on there, but well,
and that's actually what he talked. The guy who runs this podcast, I mean, he just knows his music inside out. He's been a music critic forever, and he talks a lot of times about how in that era you would gamble $13 on a song, and then you would hope the rest of the CD was worth $13.
Yeah,
and you were often wrong.
Often very, very wrong. Yes. It was Bob Marley Legend. That's where I got my introduction to Bob Marley, because that album was a pure winner. Because just what you said, that you would hopefully, that one song was great, but then everything else was kind of like, meh. But that whole album is just gold. I mean, just as a no-brainer. Okay. Gosh, tangents. I love these tangents. So good.
All right, that's a must listen to. So next time we talk, I want to hear what you think about that podcast.
I'm
listening to it in reverse order, so I'm starting from the oldest episodes going forward.
Yeah,
because it's 60 songs about the 90s, but they're on episode like 95 now. So clearly they've broken the mold.
Yeah. So did you opt to go Sans Pacer this time?
I didn't opt to. I was forced to. So I just didn't. None of my usual folks who have the miles to help me out were able to come out with me that far. I don't remember the distance, 20,000 miles, or sorry, 22,000 miles or so from where I live. Yeah. So I actually was so insecure about how I was going to perform before the race.
That's okay. It's normal for every guy to be insecure about how they perform.
Every once in a while. Thank you. You're welcome. I actually talked to my son and my friend who came out to crew me, and I was like, if I'm really falling apart, I'm going to ask you to walk with me, but I'm only going to ask you to pace me if I'm so bad that all I can do is walk. So you're not going to have to worry about running. You're just going to have to worry about walking with me. Yeah. And we didn't get there, thankfully, but that was my pacing plan, was just, if I completely fall apart, I'll walk with one of my buddies.
Yeah.
And my son included. My son came out with us, and we had a great trip together. So,
In our first conversation we ever had together, we was the hallucinations episode, where you were chasing buses in the woods like a maniac. Did you have any hallucinations this time?
I did not have any hallucinations. And that race in particular was a late start race. It was Run Rabbit Run, which I think fed into the fatigue was because we started so late. So no hallucinations this time, but what I did have this race that I've never experienced before is I get bouts of hiccups occasionally. And I've had one episode that lasted the better part of a day and a half with small little breaks in between. And I started getting hiccups somewhere around mile 80 or so. And I had basically continuous hiccups for like the next 5 or 6 hours.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that can break hiccups is
Wait, 5-6 hours of hiccups?
Yeah.
That would drive me insane. That would drive me.
It isn't fun. So one of the ways you can break hiccups is by gagging yourself. And so when you gag yourself, it causes what's called a vagal reflex. And that vagal reflex affects your diaphragm, which is the muscle that's spasming when you have hiccups. And so
what's your go-to way to gag yourself, Dr. Wagner? 2 fingers down the throat?
So, well, it's not my go-to, but when you're out on an ultra run, that's all you got. So I would just retch myself. It would take 3 to 5 attempts till I finally got like a deep enough retch that I'd break my hiccups. And then they would stay broken for anywhere from 5 minutes to a half an hour or so. So if you were anywhere within earshot of me for like those 6 hours of the race, you would think that I was just vomiting uncontrollably on the course. And it's just me trying to keep from hiccuping. And then before I get into an aid station, I'd be like, I can't be hiccuping the whole time I'm in the aid station. So I'd really make an effort then.
Oh my God. So you're trying to suppress your hiccups as you're going through your aid station?
Yeah. Before I got there, I didn't want to be a scene once I got there. So it was pre-planning for the aid station was let's retch until I'm done hiccuping.
Oh my gosh. Do you ever like get to the point where, okay, like maybe 20 minutes have passed and I think I'm clear of the hiccups, and then it just
yeah exactly.
God, that'd be the worst. Oh my
and
gosh.
You could try to hold your breath, but when you're running, breath holding just doesn't work.
Not a good idea. Not a good idea. I'm so sorry that happened. That sounds terrible.
It was an interesting obstacle. I'm glad it was at mile 80 and not at mile 30, where I'd be like, I can't do this for an entire day. You know, if it hit me at mile 30 between how fatigued I felt and how much was still in front of me, maybe the mental endurance would have faded a little bit.
Yeah. Wowzers. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's see. I got through the weather. So looking back on first off, what time did you actually finish the race at?
So I did just over 30 hours. It was a 8 a.m. start. So I'm trying to, do math on it's like childbirth. I've forgotten already most of the details.
Yeah.
24 takes me to 8 again. And then, so like I finished at like 2 p.m., I guess is when I finished.
What advice would you give to folks, who are looking to take on this challenge?
Of Cascade in particular?
Yeah.
Vert. So you got to get your vertical training in. I also think don't worry about elevation, because I think a lot of people think mountains, they think elevation, but you're sub 6,000 feet for the entire race pretty much. Mm-hmm. And you spend most of your race in the 4,000-ish range. So not really any impact of vert on your aerobic capacity. Be prepared for anything weather-wise. I think any 100 this applies to, but know what you need for rest before you start the race. And so one of the things I've learned is I can camp and do great all the way up until the day or so before the race. The last night before the race, I want a soft bed in a Airbnb or a hotel. And I think that, so knowing what kind of sleep you can get by with or without. And I actually did have to sleep on the course very briefly. I took 2 like 5-minute naps on the course just because I just got to this like point of mental exhaustion and I just needed to turn things off for a minute. And I think part of it too is just enjoy the local atmosphere and enjoy being a part of an event that's really community supported, because that's what this race is. And even like, despite the small community feel, like you're out there, and Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie is one of the racers, and he's the lead singer for Death Cab, and you're like, oh, my goal is to not get beat by Ben today. And sorry, Ben, you didn't beat me. So
Yeah, we actually have an interview with Ben coming up in our issue.
oh, great.
Later this fall. Yeah, which is super cool. And yeah, I saw him at States a few years ago. I really wanted to say hi, but I was too nervous. I would love to talk to him.
He's funny because he's the local celeb that all the ultra runners know. So they're all talking about their Ben Gibbard encounters, and because he's done Cascade 3 times now.
Yeah, gosh dang it, that's so badass. Love that he does it. Love that he does it. Let's see. So I guess before I let you go, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that you have a story just getting out to the race from St. Louis. Is that right?
Yeah. So I had a brilliant plan so I was going with 3 people, myself and 2 others, so that we were going to drive instead of fly. And I'm not a extreme environmentalist, but I'm trying to do what I can to keep our planet from burning up. And so I decided I was going to drive, and then I decided I was going to drive an electric vehicle. And so we rented a Tesla. And a couple of things when you rent an EV is, number one, they're going to tell you what it costs to fill the EV. That is for a trickle charger that takes all night to charge. So when I looked at the data, I was like, it'll cost you $5 a fill. And I drive a Jeep Wrangler. I'm like, it will cost me more in gas than it will cost me for the rental and all the electricity to get out there at $5 a fill.
Yeah.
What they don't tell you is that's trickle chargers. That is not superchargers. Supercharger costs you $25 a fill. So my electricity went up by 500%. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And the charge times, while they're not bad, 15 to 20 minutes, they certainly add up over what turns out to be about 4,000 miles.
Wow.
So we got to spend a lot of time talking in gas stations while we were waiting for our car to charge next door at the charging station. So the trip was fun, and it certainly adds. You have to travel with a different mentality when you're going with an electric vehicle.
Yeah, you do. You got to plan that sucker out, because you don't want to get caught not being able to charge. And did you find the charging stations to be reliable, or a lot of times we go and they're out of order, or there's all the time around here. It's crazy.
Yeah, so we had great luck the entire way until the way back, and maybe because there's a little more preponderance of EVs, because we went. So I went and visited family in Minnesota, then went across North Dakota, Montana, Idaho into Washington, went to Seattle, visited a family member in Seattle. Then we went down through Utah and Denver. So going back on the Western route, we ran into more charging stations that were completely full. Never saw a full charging station on the way out. So you'd end up waiting 20 minutes for a charger to get free, and then have to charge for 20 minutes after it got free.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was we ran into more broken charging handles, and it wasn't terrible. I think twice a broken handle never kept us from charging because they're always available, but twice we ran into completely full chargers.
Yeah.
And that gets frustrating when you're like counting the hours till you have to be back at work. Yeah. And you're waiting a half an hour extra to wait a half an hour to charge your car.
Yeah. We had a 2-hour trip turned into a 4-hour trip just a few weeks ago. And we were like, we would have made it with 0 miles left to go on the charge. And so I'm like, we need to pull over. Wait, there's one last station 8 miles from our house, and so we had to stop and stop there for half an hour just to get enough juice.
We had a little challenge in rural Minnesota where we didn't quite get enough juice at the last supercharger to get us to the lake where my sister lives, and then back to another supercharger again. So we had to trickle charge. It's like a lifesaver.
Yeah.
To just get enough juice to make it the next hour and a half. Oh. But yeah, that's the difference, right? It's not, I can just go until I see the light come on and I know there will be a gas station I can stop at. It's like, I have to think ahead. I can maybe make that next stop, but if I can't, I'm just screwed. I can't go get a gallon of battery juice, But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I also learned that, I'm not quite ready for a Tesla. There's a few bugs I want them to work out ahead of time. And one of them is the air conditioner. So we kind of came through the heat wave that was coming through the Southwest and kind of the Midwest on our way back. And when it's 100 outside, those bubble windows on the Tesla that look so nice, they let in a lot of heat.
Oh, they do.
And the car has a little trouble on the passenger side keeping up with that heat. So,
oh boy.
Word to the wise, if you live in Arizona, keep that in mind.
Oh, God bless you, Arizonans. I feel for you. They just had that just staggering that heat wave that over a month they had like over 110 degrees.
Yeah, my wife's family lives out there. She just visited them last week. She just got back. So she got the tail end of that.
Oof. Yeah, I was out there. I did a 6K for Aerovipa has their Insomniac Trail Series. So it's a night run. It started like at 8:30. There's a 50K, 25K, and the 6K. And it was 98 degrees when I started. I was not prepared at all for that. I knew I still wanted to do it because I've never run in the desert before. It was a wonderful experience. I would totally do it again over and over and over. Yeah, because it was kind of rad. Just you're out there, it's hot. Okay, it's hot. Just keep cool the best you can. And there are lightning strikes going on all over the place. I see a haboob like way off in the distance and it's coming our way. And luckily I finished before that sucker made it to where we were. Because if you've ever been in a haboob before, those things can be intense, which is just that monstrous dust cloud, sand cloud just coming your way. That just envelops everything.
Yeah, I didn't get caught in one, but when I was in Kuwait last spring and winter, and I got to watch one coming in over the desert in Kuwait, and you're just watching this wall of sand just start rolling over the landscape, and you're like, I'm glad I have a trailer to go into when that thing hits here.
Those are crazy. It's like, all right, God hates us. He's smiting us. That's what's happening right now. It just seems so biblical and apocalyptic. It does, yes. It's crazy. Just where the locust at? Just to bring them on in.
There's a scene from, I think it's one of the Mummy movies where the mummy's coming as this wall of sand, and it looks like that without the mummy face on top of it.
Totally does. It totally does. If you want the mummy face, go to the tunnel over at Cascade Crest. It's in there somewhere. Jason Wagner, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking with you. It's so nice to be able to talk to you without like the just the injury prevention. Yeah, the grossness of medicine. It is what it is. But yeah, thanks for your time. I'm really proud of you for getting out there and really, getting that buckle and having what was a great experience and sharing that with us.
Yeah, I was for the record, I was the second oldest old guy. So I got beat by one guy who was 58. I was the only older person than me to beat me. So I'll take that as a victory.
Congratulations.
And I do want to give one just shout out and thanks to the organizers and crew out there, great aid stations. And I will say for all the race directors out there, they brought buckets of water for us to wash our feet in after the race was done. And that is like that's just the most clutch, awesome move I've seen at a race, where you get back and here's a sponge and here's a bucket of water to get the grime off your feet. That was so awesome.
Class act. Way to go, guys.
Yeah.
All right. Until we meet again, let me know when you want to talk about the next episode.
Yeah. I want to do sleep one of these times. That's what I want to talk about soon. So
okay, let's do it. All right. Have a great rest of the week.
All right. Take care, Scotty.
You
Thanks.
too. Thanks.